So welcome everyone to our watercolour advent calendar. It is the 1st of December, so we need to open our calendar and find out what we're painting today. Here we go. A Christmas pudding. Grab your paints and let's get started. So let's get painting. I want to talk you through first what I've got on my desk. So I've got a pencil and a rubber, and then I've got some rounded point brushes. I've got size 4, size 2, size 0, and then I've got two sub-zero size brushes, 3/10 and 4/10. And these are really readily available in all sorts of different brands. But if you want the brands that I use, always look in the episode notes. I list everything with links. These are the Pro Art Masterstroke range. Then my paints is my regular palette. A whole range of different colours in there, but we'll be mixing up the colours if we don't have what we need, and as always it will be listed in the episode notes what I'm using. So I've also got a bit of kitchen roll to blot off my brushes and clean them properly, and a jar of water, and when the jar of water gets a bit too dark and murky we'll be swapping it in for fresh water. So let's get started. We're always going to draw first and then paint. So in pencil I'm going to draw our Christmas pudding, starting with a little mound like that, and then a curved bottom, and then the cream. Now the items that I've chosen for this advent calendar are a range of iconic images of Christmas that are familiar to me, but then also I asked my patrons, who are from all around the world, to suggest some inspiration of Christmases that they celebrate in their native country. So you'll be seeing a few sort of new and maybe unfamiliar things. So we've just done a little oval for the plate, and then we're going to pop in a few berries and some holly. And the holly, all I'm going to do for that for the moment is just draw in two central lines, and that's all we need for our pencil. Sometimes I like to rub the pencil out lightly with my rubber just to give myself a really faint pencil outline, so I highly recommend you do that too. Now the one last thing to mention is, because we're going to be working on this one bit of paper throughout Advent for 24 tutorials, you need to make sure that your hands are nice and clean. No hand cream, no grease, no oil on them, because the more we touch this bit of paper, the more we're likely to leave little hand marks and things, which will make the paint resistant to the paper. So if you want, you can always cover up the rest of your sheet with a bit of paper to just keep it nice and clean. But yeah, that's something to think about. So let's get started. We're going to begin with some burnt sienna up here, and I'm just going to start by painting in the actual Christmas pudding cake bit itself. So I'm going to have a tiny bit of Paynes Grey as well, which I'm going to mix into burnt sienna here, so that leaves me with two different browns. And I'm going to use my size 0 brush, and I'm going to start colouring that in. The paper stock we're using, for anyone who has ordered the printed calendar and had it posted to them, this is a 300 gram Tintoretto gesso cardstock, which is sort of like a somewhere between cold pressed and hot pressed. It's a card paper stock that I love to use to print things on. And because we wanted this printed grid, it's absolutely fantastic for both printing and painting on. So I'm just filling that in, and then I'm going to get some of my darker colour and just give this a little bit more depth and interest. So we're just going to fill that all in. So we've let that dry a little bit, and I've got some yellow ochre here and a bit of my shadow mix, which is Paynes Grey Burnt Sienna, just sort of knocking back the warmth on that. And we're going to use this colour to sort of highlight and low light the cream on top. So I'm using my really small brush just to add a little bit of very subtle sort of swoops into the cream there to just make it a little less completely white to the page. So I'm just sort of outlining it and smoothing it in. Really nice. And then I'm going to also use just a little bit more of actual grey shadow to do a little bit on the plate there. So a little swoop round. And a little just underneath as well. So I know that some of you might not be too familiar with Christmas pudding. In the UK we have both Christmas cake and Christmas pudding, and they're subtly different. Christmas pudding is a sort of steamed pudding that we have as our last course, our dessert for Christmas dinner. And it comes usually sort of covered in cream, and we actually set fire to it at the dinner table, which is, we sort of douse it in alcohol and brandy, and then someone sets fire to it, which just seems kind of crazy these days, but there you go. So now I've got some cadmium red, and I am going to paint in some holly berries. Anyone who's seen me paint any kind of berry will know that I paint a little bit of unpainted shine on there, so we've just done a tiny little bit of unpainted space there, and whilst that dries I'm now going to paint in the currants and raisins that sit in the pudding. So I've got some really nice dark shadow mix mixed up there, and all I'm going to do is speckle the pudding with some dots, and we also have, well, there's all sorts of fruit inside there, so I'm going to put some red dots in as well, a few cherries and things, and then just give some of the cream a bit of a shadowy finish. It's all about just these little extra details that really make it sort of jump off the page. Just smoothing it down there. And I think I'll also, while we just wait for those holly berries to dry, I'm going to do a nice little edge to the plate, a Christmassy plate, so just some little dashes of cadmium red. And finally the holly. So I've got my sap green here. My sap green is often commented that the sap green I use is a little bit more bluey green than a lot of yours. So if you need to add some blue into it, then one of your darker blues, a French ultramarine or Prussian blue, is a great shout. I will actually add a little bit of blue into mine as well anyway, just to get a really crisp colour. Now these little central pencil lines that I've drawn are going to be very helpful for the holly. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint down one, and then I'm going to use the brush to go 1, 2, 3 and home. Clean off my brush and just use what's there, because there's loads of colour there, and that helps give the holly a nice shiny finish. and then do the other side too, and then I try to leave a tiny bit of unpainted space there. And I'm just going to fill in the second holly leaf now. And there you have your first Advent calendar Christmas illustration. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see you tomorrow.